Thank you, Donald. Thank you, Danny, for playing. Uh, Brother Charles is going to come and share with us his experience. Sometimes I get to hear these things with some of our veterans one-on-one, and they tell me stories and things. And I've asked him to share this morning briefly just some of maybe his experience in serving our country. And I think it's very interesting, some of the responsibilities he had. And I wouldn't want to do it, what he had to do, and he may share that, he may not, but anyhow, I just felt led to have him come. I wonder if you're a veteran today. I know we've lost a few, they've gone on to be with the Lord, but if you're here today and you're a veteran, would you stand right quick and let's acknowledge you? We have some that are not here, we have some that are sort of feeble, we've lost a lot of them, and Charles, appreciate you, brother. Come on.
Like the fool that I am, I immediately said yes. And yesterday I sat down, I thought, Charles, you haven't thought about your military life for the last 40 years. And I said, I better put some of this in perspective, and I better write it down, or I'm not going to do what I need to do. And I told Renee, it started bringing back a lot of memories that I haven't thought about in a long, long time. But they're fond memories, they're stressful memories, but I want you to listen this morning, because my career in the military is not the typical military career that guys that go in now do. They go in, they take their basic, they do their MOS, and then they serve and they come home. That's not quite what happened with Charles. So listen and bear with me. It won't take long, but I want you to hear it. My military career was not the standard career as most soldiers, as you will see from the story that I'm about to tell you. When I was ready, my number was coming up fast for the draft to go to Vietnam. Charles did not want to go to Vietnam. So, being the brilliant young man that I was, I enlisted. And by enlisting, I got to pick out the MOS or the job that I wanted to do. The job I picked out was a 24 Bravo. For those of you that don't know what that is, that's a radar technician in Hawk missile system. When I enlisted, I joined in Ashland, Kentucky, which is right across the river from Ironton, Ohio, where I was born. And for those of you that have never been in the military, I left there and went to Fort Knox, Kentucky for basic training. And those of you that have never been in the military have no idea what those 8 weeks were like. It has always amazed me when we got to Fort Knox, there were guys there that were 50 pounds overweight. There were guys there like myself that came in pretty good shape because we'd been playing sports all of our life. But during those 8 weeks, if you needed to lose 30 pounds, you lost them. If you needed to gain 20 pounds, you gained them. We ate the same food, we did the same exercises, and we did the same mile walks every day. But the guys that needed to lose weight, lost weight. The guys that needed to gain weight, gained weight. I can still stand and look at you, and in front of me, I can see Sergeant First Class John Call, my drill sergeant. If you think the stories that you've seen about drill sergeants are jokes, they're not. This was the meanest and the toughest man I have ever met in my life. He was also one of the best men that I've ever met in my life. For I knew that if I had to go to Vietnam and get in a foxhole somewhere, I wanted him right beside me, because he knew what to do and when to do it. After basic training, I was sent to Fort Bliss, Texas, for my advanced training. I was picked out as a 24 Bravo, and I graduated number 1 in my class. and was given the automatic promotion. Now, I got there as an E2. I went to school for 19 weeks, and I got promoted to E5. I skipped PFC, I skipped corporal, and I went straight to buck sergeant. It's unheard of. It only happens if you go to those schools and graduate number one in your class. And I was given the opportunity to stay at Fort Bliss for the next year as an instructor, which I did. I loved every minute of it. If I had been able to convince Sue Clay to move to Fort Bliss, Texas, in El Paso, I would still be there. I loved El Paso, Texas. At the end of the year, I was sent to Key West, Florida, to the 1st of the 65th, after I'd finished my year in Texas. I was there 6 months when my battalion commander put me in to be on the honor guard to bring fallen soldiers from Vietnam to their final resting place. I was sent to Dover, Delaware, to Dover Air Force Base, where for the next year, every week or every few days, we picked up bodies of fallen soldiers, and it was our job to escort them to their final resting place. During that year, I went to 51 funerals. And I hadn't thought about any of that until yesterday. And I told Renee before the service, I sat there and I started seeing those families. We were given a dossier on every man that on the body that we were taking. When they would come back, they would give us what his rank was, what his job had been in Vietnam, so that we could tell the family. Because in most cases, their families had no idea what they had done for the last year or 18 months, because most of the jobs that they were doing were very, very secret. And the families had no idea where they were at and what they were doing. But it was our job to escort them. One of the perks of doing that was the Army paid for us to fly coach. We always flew coach. But when we would get on the plane, as soon as the stewardess would tell the pilot that we were on board, he would come to the seat where we were sitting and escort us to first class. And we would stay in first class the whole flight. Now, another thing that happens when you're the escort of a body, whenever that body unloads from the plane, it is your job and your duty to go down to the tarmac and stand when they open the plane at attention while that body is being unloaded or loaded. The only time that casket is out of your sight is when it's in the body of that plane. When it got to the funeral home, there were always two of us, and it was our job to stand at that casket until they had the ceremony, whether it was either cremation or burial. 51 funerals in a year. It was the most stressful time of my life, but it was the most rewarding. Up until just a few years ago, I got Christmas cards every year from a lot of families that were the families of the boys that I had taken home. Now most of them have gone on. Most of the families were older than I am, so they've gone on to be with Jesus. During that time and in that service, I was awarded, and I told Renee this is the first time it's been out of the drawer at my house, except to show Clay one time in over 40 years. I was awarded the Army Commendation Medal, which is known as the ARCOM. It's given for service above and beyond. Why I would get an ARCOM for doing what I did is unfathomable to me. I got more out of that than they did, because I felt like I was serving those families. And we would get it set around with some of them. One trip we were sent to San Francisco, and the guy that we were taking, his father was the executive vice president of Wells Fargo Bank. He called our commanding officer the day after the funeral when we were supposed to be leaving and said, I would like for these two guys to stay here for a week. The commanding officer said, sure. They took us, this man was a friend of the man who owns the King Ranch. They took us to the King Ranch, and we spent the next week on the King Ranch. Guys, I could tell you story after story after story of the families and what they did for us. They always did more for us than we did for them. It was just our job to be there. But they had some kinship with us because we were their only link to that fallen soldier. And it meant more than you'll ever know that I got to do that. After that year, I was sent back to Germany for a year. I was in a place called, and the name of the place I was in is called Weilflicken, Germany. We were on top of a mountain. It's the only place in the world that I've ever been where I could stand on top of the mountain, and I was above the clouds, and the sun was shining, and our offices and stuff that were down on the bottom of the mountain were having a snowstorm. We were on top of the mountain, and it was sun shining and beautiful. We were above the clouds. It's also the only place I've ever been where I was so cold, the Army issued us what is called Mickey Mouse boots. Mickey Mouse boots are boots that have an air on the side of them, and some of the hunters may know, you guys may use them to hunt with, I don't know. But you could stick an air hose in the side of it, and it would blow up and put a cushion of air around your feet so you wouldn't freeze. While I was in Weilflicken, when you walked out of the Quonset hut where our unit was at, you had to punch a time clock. The reason you punch the time clock in the wintertime is because if you were out there over 11 minutes, they come looking for you because you would freeze. You came back in every 11 minutes. After leaving Germany, I got back home and was sent back to Key West, Florida again because in the service where the Hawk missiles were, the only places you could go were Texas, Florida, Germany, and Korea. So every time you came back to the States, if you weren't going back to be an instructor, you got sent to Key West, Florida. Key West, Florida sounds like a beautiful place to go to. After you've been on a 2x7 island 10 days, you've seen every bit that you need to see. And when you're there for 5 years, you're ready to get out of there as quick as you can. When I went back, one of the boys that had been with me on the duty with the bodies had told me about the All-Army softball team. I love playing ball. And he said, all you have to do is when they have the tryouts in April, all you have to do is pay your own way and take your own leave and fly to Fort Benning, Georgia. If you make the team, the Army reimburses you for the travel and takes back your leave time. There were 384 of us showed up. 25 of us made it. So for the next 18 months, I traveled the world playing fast pitch softball for the Army. That's not like slow pitch. We had a boy from Biloxi, Mississippi that was 6'7". He was our pitcher. He lost 4 games in 18 months, and we played ball every day. I saw every state in the Union. We went to every state in the Union and played ball. And we went to the following foreign countries: England, Spain, Italy, Germany, Japan, Korea, Australia, the Philippines, Okinawa, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, and France. I got to see the world playing softball for the United States Army. Biggest thrill of my life. Biggest thrill of my life. Playing ball all over the world. But as soon as that was over, guess where I got sent back to? Key West, Florida. And for the next 5 years, I was in Key West. And I wanted to enlist again. I'd already re-enlisted once, and I was ready to make this a career. But those of you that knew my sweet little wife knew that she could be very persuasive. And when I got off the plane from Germany the last time, and walked down there, and my son and my daughter and my wife came toward me, and my son had no idea who I was until his mama said, "That's your daddy." She looked at me when we got to Key West, and when I told her my hitch was coming up, I'm going to re-enlist. Maybe they'll send us somewhere else. She said, "Where can they send us?" "Texas and here. They won't let me go to Korea, and they won't let me go to Germany with you. We're finished." Those of you that know my sweet little wife or knew my sweet little wife knew that when she said, "I was finished," I was finished. I went to my first sergeant. I was 3 days away from time to re-enlist. I had 11 years. I was on the downhill slide. Had just made E7 on the downhill slide. Had it made. And I said, "Top, I'm not going to re-enlist." He said, "You are one crazy human being." I said, "You're not married to Sue Clay." So 3 days later, I got out of the service, came back to North Carolina, and that brash 20-year-old that joined was now a family man raising 2 of the beautifulest children any man could ever have. And I was fortunate enough to have 3 of the best grandsons that any man could ever have. All because I listened to "You're finished." Had I stayed in the Army, I probably wouldn't be standing here today. Not because I would have been killed, but because I wouldn't have had a family. Because I would have let the military take over. But when she said, "It's finished," it was just like Jesus. It's finished. And I came home. The best years of my life up until I got out were in the military. Like I said, I went in a brash 20-year-old young man who thought he had the world by the tail. Realized very soon that I didn't. When you go to 51 funerals in a year, it'll wake you up in a hurry. 3 weeks ago, I was coming home from picking up a body for the funeral home. My hands started tingling. And I thought, this is not right. So when I got home, I called David and Anissa. They were on their way to church. I said, "You guys run by. I want to run over to the emergency room. They'll probably send me back home. But I want to go." My hands feel like they're asleep, but they're waking up. So when they got there, I just about made up my mind. I said, "I'm not going." And Anissa said, "Dad, remember what Mom told you? Your body will always tell you when something's wrong." So I got in the car, came to Albemarle, walked in the emergency room. They took an EKG, and I noticed they were, kind of hurrying around. He said, "We're going to send you down for another checkup." And on our way back up the hall, I saw the helicopter pilot standing in the hall. And I told the nurse that was pushing me, I said, "Oh man, some poor guy's getting ready to be flown out of here." We got to the room, and when we walked back in the room, the doctor walked in and said, "Mr. Clay, they don't want you in an ambulance. They want you on the chopper." And I looked at him, and he said, "You're having a massive heart attack." I was on the chopper when we got there. They did their thing, and 2 days later, I walked out of the hospital. Last week, I went in and had another stent put in. Everything seems to be fine. I went to my first day of cardiac rehab. The doctor said I did great. I feel great. Looks like I'm going to be around for a long time, Anissa. So quit worrying about the wheel. But I say all that to say this. God, for the last 50 years, has been the center of my life. He wasn't always. When I was in the military, I was singing in nightclubs. When I would get to Key West, I could sing in the bars. I thought I was going to be the next Johnny Cash or the next Kenny Rogers. Sang in country bands. Thought I was up here, folks. But God had a way of bringing me down. bring me back to where I needed to be. And for the last 30 years, I've traveled and sang His Word. And I am so ready for them to open the doors of these churches so we can stand on these platforms again and spread God's Word. That's my military career. Thank you for listening.